Well, hello there. Everything sucks, my life is in shambles, and I'm hanging on by a thread. But enough about that. Let's talk about George Harrison. My essay regarding this man was entitled The Material Worlds, the media's portrayal of the quiet Beatle. And in it, I described how George Harrison, the Beatles' lead guitarist, is typically categorized as the group's quiet anti-materialist, and the various ways in which this is and is not accurate. Since finishing the assignment, developments about George's life and times and assigned readings has reinforced quite a few of my, points. George Harrison, like the rest of the Beatles, or indeed like any other celebrity or public figure, had a cultivated identity. This was done both as a means of maintaining, the artist's privacy, and also, as a sort of consistent branding. The Beatles, in particular, relied on this kind of branding, not only to maintain their own identities, but also to maintain the relationships between them. They were a group. And similarly, there are both elements of truth and artifice to Harrison's constructed identity. His status as an anti-materialist certainly holds water. Like John, Paul, and Ringo, he had amassed notoriety for being something of an iconoclast and coming from a working-class background. Of the four of them, he spoke with the strongest and thickest Liverpudlian accent, and he was easily one of the poorest, alongside Ringo. So distinct were his feelings on, class awareness, that he was the center of a humorous scene in the Hard Day's Night film, where he ragged on the literally stuffed shirt modern trends. In fact, Rolling Stone magazine even proclaimed posthumously that Harrison was less sold in the Beatles' mystique than even John Lennon. Of all of them, he was easily the least, show busy. He was similarly well known for his later adoration of Eastern mysticism, which would go on to definitively inform his life and his career at large. Apparently, this was also a prominent feature of his youth as well. His biographer wrote of how, George's mother would repeatedly listen to a Radio India to soothe her children when they were both in utero and very young. I guess they kind of started young. And another, heavily stated part of his character is to be that of one of the more musically experimental members. To an extent, this is also very, very, very true. Going off of, the kind of, really, interesting sound that, that perforated, what he made in his personal career. In addition to any of the stuff that he was credited with writing while he's with the Beatles, you could easily distinguish them from the others just from their tone alone. And in learning in the readings just how many many of Harrison's songs were rejected by McCartney and Lennon, and how that was basically the biggest reason he wanted out of the project, this only cements this fact. So really, is being this a quiet anti-materialist, this aspect of his character was more than a little exaggerated by the media and by their pop cultural standing. It wasn't exactly created from whole cloth. However, much George Harrison's private life certainly didn't reflect his status as a quiet Beatle. First and foremost, George Harrison apparently was, just not all that quiet. I mean this both literally and, in a more metaphorical sense. Tom Petty infamously told, the Rolling Stone magazine that his friend would never shut up. And yes, that is a direct quote. But he was also very, sociable, this is both, sociable in a positive and negative sense. As he was rather sociable in ways that caused no shortage of personal and domestic conflicts. His first wife, Patty Boyd, stated that he wasn't the kind of person who half did things. His home life would entail bouts of intense meditation, immediately followed by intense partying or intense work with no middle ground. He would meditate for hours, hour after hour, she wrote. Then, as if the pleasures of the flesh were too hard to resist, he would stop meditating, snort coke, have fun, flirting and partying. There was no normality in that either. And along with that, his various passions in life, be they gardening, Formula One cars, Hinduism, or his music especially, they also reflected this fervor. Like, in fact, like in like much of his music, you can tell that he was clearly aware of just how much obsession he performed his day-to-day life with. In the self-titled single of his "Living in the Material World" album, the lyrics state that his senses were never gratified, only swelling like a tide that could drown me in the material world. He also, unfortunately, possessed a pair of wandering eyes when it came to women, especially ones that weren't either of his wives. These affairs were apparently so common that they were enough to tear apart his relationship with Patty Boyd, his first wife, into the arms of their mutual friend, Eric Clapton. And apparently echoed all throughout his second marriage with Olivia Arias as well. Although, in fairness, Arias has claimed that, that she's like a bit more forgiving on that regard, that she almost saw it as a bit of like a badge of honor that they were able to work through it, because it meant that, like they could appreciate what they had like so much more, that they'd come like to an understanding, and and then like it worked through so much hardship. Like I'm not sure how much that holds up, but it is a perspective. So in summation, George Harrison was a flawed man. He was one of the most influential musicians of the 20th century, and he humbly developed the medium and questioned the status quo. But he had an incredibly tumultuous personal life, arguably one unbecoming of the peace and serenity he promoted spiritually. This character of George Harrison that was presented by himself and by the media, while not wholly inaccurate, did poorly to fully reflect his life and behavior. This is true of any of the Beatles, or of any cultural historical figure. All people are each complex and complicated human beings in their own right, whether they're famous or not. This concludes my my second speech. Thank you.